Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to another Supercoach Insider podcast. My name is Swiz, here with my round 14 Supercoach discussion. By this point of the season, it's more answering your questions, talking the teams. It's a bit different tonight. It is Thursday night, so we have no footy on. So it's perfect time to sort of get on and talk. It's a bit different. Much prefer be spending this time watching a game and getting my hopefully a good vice captain score, but that's the way it is at this point of the season with no more Thursday night games to come. But yeah, we will get into it nonetheless. As always, check us out on all our social media platforms, in particular YouTube, Spotify. Get in contact with us, Swiz26 or Supercoach Insider 100. Thanks to Ben. He's just done a little bit of work behind the scenes. Did talk to the boys. They've still unfortunately got a lot going on, but hopefully we'll have them back at some point. Thank you for the people who've been checking in, seeing how they are doing. Beautiful, JT. Love it straight up. I've got all the questions ready, fired up this week. We did have a couple technical problems last week, but yes, awesome thumbnail. That's from the 2017 grand final. Obviously, I'm looking like an absolute psycho there. In love with Dusty, as it was actually the perfect night because not only did we have the killers on stage, the players came through the crowd, and as you can see, I was right on the fence. I'd love to know who the girl is next to me too. She was getting really into the day. So that photo was done by the Herald Sun. Family member managed to get hold of that for me. So that was pretty cool to have that the Herald Sun take that snap right at the time. So I think that might have been actually in the paper as well. So just perfect timing. I've also got the new shirt on, which is the Tasmanian jumper. It's got the big T on it. So I'm not thrilled with the actual design, but thought I'd get the foundation member jumper. So you got the you can see I've got the Gold Coast one in the background there, which is Gary Ablett Jr.'s one. And but I thought I'll get on with the Tassie boys and get their jumper. So hopefully it's when they start playing, I might try to get a couple of the players to sign it, and we'll hang this up here at some point in the podcast room. So in regards to me, a few people have been asking how actually am I going. So let's actually share that. We know it's been a bit of a disastrous year so far. That's the way it does go sometimes. It's a little bit frustrating, but I think I'm still ranked about 12,000, but we'll get this up here so you guys actually know how I'm going. Just a few things have gone wrong for me. So 12,798 overall. Like, it's not terrible. If I can at least get inside, like, the goal still to get within that top 5%. I think top 1,000 this year is out of reach, but so I feel like even last week bringing in Laird because I'm thinking he was going to get the boost in CBAs, which he did. He got the possessions that he did, but unfortunately just couldn't convert that into Supercoach points. It was good to watch my boys win, but it's just didn't work out the way I wanted it. So my team is sitting like this at the moment, depending on one big change. Ryan, Sheasel, Houston, Fisher, Stewart, who's been absolutely awful, as we know. Charlie Comben was going to get traded out, but the fact that he's still playing this week and Roller Garcia has been dropped after his career best numbers, Comben will survive. And then I've got Martin, and then Zach Reed's just going to be a loophole guy. Can't do anything about him now that he's going to miss the rest of the year by the looks of things. After that VFL injury. And it's a real shame because Zach Reed dominated that first half of the VFL match before he went down again. We've got Bont, Butters, and I'll talk a bit about a couple of these players. It's more depth in a second. Sarong, Goulden, well done for all those that got on Goulden last week. Absolutely flying, even though I did put up on Twitter that his numbers weren't so good at the SCG and playing a little bit more outside. Absolutely tore that Geelong midfield a new one. Rory Laird, and I'll talk a little bit more about him and his situation in a moment. Tom Green has got to be probably the most disappointing player of the season. And that's saying something when we've got like Stewart and Clary, but for a kid who's got all the talent in the world is absolutely not delivering on what we're expecting. The big Brev, he's doing a good job for us, making some cash. And I brought in Dowling last week, and he was pretty good, but I need to talk a little bit more about him. Got Merritt. Oliver, at least now, with Petrarca out for the rest of the season, has got the potential there to score some points for us and repay the faith. The good thing about Clary is also he he did score most of his points when Petrarca was off the field. Started slow. Track was on about 50 odd when he got that hit. He came back on, but even like Oliver slowed down while Track came back on for those 5 minutes, and then kept going and put up a decent score last week for Clary. So hopefully that kind of continues. So it does have a few people retrading him to kind of see how he does go without Track. Jordan Clark's now doing a bit of a job for us, which is nice after that early where he was actually dropping cash when he got to about 160, 170. Brody Grundy's the one that I'm looking at trying to get in this week. So I'll have and I'll discuss a little bit why in a second. I'm looking at also bringing in Kruger. So they're my two sort of trades. Maxi Gorn, is just ticking her along beautifully. Probably get back over 700 again. Flanders isn't playing this week, but yeah, Heaney, one of the best forwards. Jackson, the only one I don't really have in there is Zorko. I think that could hurt me this week. Hopefully Brisbane put a little bit, St Kilda put a little bit of attention to him, but if you've got a vice captain, he is an obvious one on the Friday night because he could, his break even's 180 and he could get close to that. So that does have me worried. Dill Moore I brought in because of these next couple of weeks, Richmond and West Coast. So he played really well. Dropped a mark late and he had a potential, could have kicked another goal there too. So easily could have been a 110, 120 game. So I was pretty happy with his first output for me. Tommy Powell, is ticking along with an 84 average. It's not great, but at the same time, we've seen all the forwards and they're not really great either. And Fife's still in there, just doing a job. Hopefully he can come up with another ton. Richards, the way it's nearly going, I'll end up carrying him, but he could be one that still gets traded out. Hopefully he comes back in soon. Now that I've sort of rid him through the buys because just had other things I was dealing with. So the big two for me is to bring in Grundy. The only way I can do it if I don't want to, because I was originally looking at English, but we know English has got the buy. And Grundy's got 2 games, is trading one of the premiums. So at the moment, I've actually moved Dacos out of my side. So the options really for me at the moment could be potentially Bont. So Dacos is named, but it kind of would have their final fitness test tomorrow. So I'm waiting to see how that plays out. We know he had the low score last week and got subbed out. I expect him to probably get through and play, but just because they are playing North Melbourne, he either will probably get the Shields tag or the fact that why do they need to risk him? And because I'm so far behind at the moment, I don't mind kind of taking a risk like that and moving him on just to try to get the points from a Grundy. Hopefully Dacos drops another sort of poor score, misses with the bye week, and then ends up getting him back in sort of 80k cheaper. So that's what I'm thinking there. And I've only need one more position, and realistically Combin's filling that position at the moment, so I'm just trying to get that extra defender. So that's what I'm kind of looking at there. And then so that's the option at the moment, Dacos, to get that ruck in. And it's really frustrating because I had obviously Grundy early in the year for those people who've been following me from the start. So, yep, that's a bit frustrating, but oh well, that's the way it's played out. And the other potential there is Bont. So Bont's been sick all week. So he's got to get through a fitness test before the Fremantle game. So there's potential that Bont misses and him with the bye. So if it's Dacos that plays and Bont that doesn't, I'll probably do it to Bont. As much as I'd probably prefer Bont at the moment, slightly just over Dacos. But just because Bont's obviously not going to drop as much cash. But so those both two. Laird's another one. He actually came off the track early today. So got to monitor that. So we've got 3 guys in there, Dacos, Bont, and Laird. We've got to watch for our last team. So definitely something to be aware with all your teams this week is we could have 3 key players, if you have any of them, that could potentially miss. Like it would be absolutely catastrophic if all of Dacos, Bont, and Laird miss. If none of them miss, great. If only one misses, well, I think people can sort of handle that, or because it is best 18, but something to be aware of. And that's not on top of a couple of the other things, and I'll talk about teams soon. But there's obviously been a couple outs that we need to focus on as well. So apart from that, that's how we're kind of sitting at the moment. And I know we'll have some questions about some of the rookies that we need to focus on. So I'll discuss that in a moment. Alrighty, so we'll get into some questions and I'll get into some of these teams. Just couple of these important ins and outs, which will obviously hopefully help you guys with what you're looking at trading. So I don't really like cheese. I always love you, no, mate. Thank you. I hope everybody has a good Supercoach week. There are a few people in our leagues to fly, and we had Nate on a couple of weeks ago, so he's still right up there. I know Louise in the Supercoach Insider group, I think she's still top 10. Our good mate Al Patton's going really well. I've got to shout out my mate Painey. I think you're up there, maybe 400th. So good to see you doing really well, mate. There's a couple other Ben Ashton. I think you might be 16th or 17th overall at the moment, something like that, mate. I'm sure you might be in the group chat later, so let us know. But you're up there too, so it's good to see some people, friends of the podcast, who are doing very well this year. And I know a few other people have been hitting me up saying, I'm first year about inside the top 100, and so really hopefully we can get through these bye rounds the next couple of weeks, and you guys can push towards prizes, which is always a great achievement. Thanks, Greg. I'm trying to keep the insider flag flying at the moment, and hopefully the boys will be back at some point soon. Okay, Carl, Swiz, man of the people, thank you. Keeps leading from the front, not a front runner. Thanks, mate. And yeah, I'm happy to front up. As I said, I'm not having a great season, but I'm still here to give you guys advice. And I do appreciate those who sent me some DMs, couldn't get on the chat tonight, but are happy to talk it through their teams and what they're thinking and stuff, and hopefully can get a solution for that. Beautiful. Worried about the Neil tag, or should known on it. So I'll get into a little bit of teams, because these are important before, as you guys start putting up some of the questions about your teams. But probably the biggest one is to do with Brisbane and St Kilda, because it is the Thursday night game. It's the one where a lot of people are trying to get their the Friday night game, trying to get their vice captain in. It is the obvious vice captain game, just because of Zorko being there, but also Neil. And the big one there is Nasiah Wanganeen Malira being managed. So because of the bye next week, that means he will miss 2 weeks. So very important. I know a few people are looking at getting a defender in, even though St Kilda still have a bye. Some are thinking about Jack Sinclair. Did have a really ripping week last week. We know what he can do when he's playing off half back. So a little bit of food for thought there, with the potential to have Jack Sinclair. And then I don't really like Jesus about Neil's tag. So Ross Lyon did say he's going to put some attention into one of these Brisbane players. I don't think it'll be Dunkley. It just comes down to, is it Neil or is it Zorko? Now, the fact that it's we got Winghagen, who usually plays in a midfielder. He's named in the midfield. You'd expect him to go straight to Neil. So that's where you'd expect in the tag. But St Kilda every week just seem to have to give points up to defenders. I didn't get to see that ugly matchup the other day on the Saturday night. Not much of it anyway. So I was probably lucky there on the Saturday night, because I heard it was an absolute shocker. But in the end, the Saints got the points. And if you're a Saints supporter, you'd be happy because you got the points. But yeah, it wasn't obviously a great game of footy to watch, but they did what they had to. So yeah, I wonder if St Kilda will even consider putting any forward pressure on Zorko, or they'll just let him and the other defenders run in and do what they want. I've got Darcy Wilmot in a few drafts, been actually performing really well. If you do find him on any waivers, potentially get on him this week. Starcevic is another one. Was it Ullard from Gold Coast last week? Went like 157, I think it was. So yeah, any of these guys here who aren't obvious normal regular Supercoach scorers, if you play drafts, go search for them, because they could be in for a big night. The other one we've got to mention is Ari Shawnmaker. Lot of reps on this kid playing in that halfback role. The only problem is potential job security going forward. But if he plays well, we've seen Darcy Wilson play all year, so there's no reason why he couldn't potentially keep his spot if he has a really good game. Some people are a bit desperate and want to move him in straight away. I can understand it. In a perfect world, you'd rather watch and then maybe a downgrade option. But if you are somebody like me who has Riley Garcia, or even if it's Charlie Compton in the back line, and you are worried about him losing cash, you definitely could go there. So that's probably a couple of important games. So I think, yeah, if you had to vice captain anyone, I'd be more on Zorko. Neil, I probably am worried a little bit about the tag. I think probably Doug Lynn's and McCluggey's. But what will probably end up actually happening, you can see probably Winghagen going to Neil for the first half. If the Saints are getting beaten, they'll either release the tag, or if McCluggage is getting off the train, they might swap it over to him. But I'm not a huge fan for the Neil vice captain this week. I think he still goes all right, but yeah, like they've come out and said they're going to tag. It's no different to Dacos last week, and we did the last minute change for a lot of people. A lot of people had Dacos going into the King's birthday match, and the news came out that they would be putting attention on him, which they did. And so a lot of people moved over to Gawn. So the only annoying thing, because of the lockout, and we've seen this every Friday and Thursday night games, the game's meant to start at 7:30 and it ends up starting at like 7:32, 7:33. And then Supercoach obviously locks out at 7:30. So in a perfect world, I like to see who's running over for the tag and try to have that last minute swap. But just because the games are starting 2 or 3 minutes late, we can't do that. Carl's also asked, with Nasai, Wanganeen, Malira missing the next two, if you were tight on round 15 clearance, would you think about moving him? And 100% I would move him. And that's because, you've got in 2 weeks there. Unless you're playing in leagues and it's not that, and you're not playing, but if you are playing for overall, and it's going to affect you. So you want to buy free type player. If you don't have Fisher, he's obviously flying at the moment. If not, Jordan Clark from Freo, if you can afford that money at 580, looks awesome. So you got the obvious ones like your Luke Ryans, Zorkos and stuff. But I'm expecting that you've probably got them, Carl. So you'd probably want to go and look at one of those other ones, and I think Clark, and then you might look at say a Whitfield type. I'm not as a big fan of the Whitfield compared to some of the others, but just because I think there's probably better players that are averaging. Not everybody's going to have all of Ryan and Houston and all those round 13 guys. So, if you don't have any of those round 13 Freo or Port Adelaide guys, get on one of them. If you do, well, then maybe Whitfield. Alrighty, and there is a good question coming up from Greg, and we'll get into that in a minute, because asking about one of those players in particular. Bulldogs are playing Freo on Saturday. Now, if Bont was to miss, I think Abs is pretty big on bringing Ed Richards in, so that's one to watch, because he could potentially have a massive game if Bont was to missing. Treloar is a bit of an unsung hero this year. He is absolutely flying. Well done to anybody who's on him, because he's a real point of difference. Fife being named in the midfield's handy for myself. I don't know too many people have him still, but that back line, Ryan, Clark, Josh Draper, I've actually seen in a few teams. He just keeps chugging along for people during the buys, doing, he's not getting a lot, but just doing his thing. Caleb Sarong scored really well. I think he's over the last 4 or 5 games that he's played against the Bulldogs. So one to watch. I know he's been a little bit disappointing from a vice captain point of view, but the guy's still one of the highest averaging in the midfield. He's let's go up these recent last 3 scores against the Dogs are 140, 138, and 130. So that can't be ignored from a vice captain point of view. Again, if you don't have Zorko, it's hard to go against a Luke Ryan type. I don't mind that one either. So there's a couple options out of that game. And just annoying Garcia being dropped, and even Lockie McNeil, a few people jumped on him too. So Bevo doing Bevo things. Not a lot to talk about Richmond Hawthorn, except for the fact of Dusty's 300th. Congratulations to the great man. Absolutely wrapped as a Richmond supporter for everything he's done for our club. And just the entire competition. I really hope he sticks it to the media and doesn't talk to them again, because that's just what he does. And goes on and does what he needs to do for footy. Tigers have brought back Tom Lynch, so that'll be interesting. This is actually really going to be hopefully a cracking game. Hawks up and about, and it could potentially be a real outside chance for finals. Just a shame they didn't win one of those games against Collingwood or Port Adelaide, because it could have potentially really set up their year. Will Day has been fantastic. Still not a bad price point. It's just smashing in that midfield for the Hawks. Dylan Moore, who I jumped on obviously last week. So Richmond this week, and then it was the bye, and then has West Coast after that. So as a forward option who's playing midfield, doing very well. So a couple options there. All right, Crows versus Swans, and here's the big ones we talked about before with Laird, and now what happens with Laird also affects a couple other people in here. Isaac Rankin coming back, so we know he'll get some midfield time. How much midfield time he gets will probably depend on if Laird plays or not. And the other one then that will affect is Billy Dowling. So he looked all right. Yeah, I thought on debut he did a lot of good things. Had the opportunity to potentially win the game late. So yeah, I'd be shocked if he was named sub, but then Matthew Nix actually talked about potentially naming him sub. The fact he's named on field is not the worst thing in the world, but because you usually have the sub come from the interchange, but Nix has done it before, so there is a bit of a worry about could he do it, because Nankervis played really well last week. Michelini's fantastic. Sam Berry, he has subbed before, so potentially it's probably Cook out of that group, but I do get a little worried about what Nix does. So we've got to kind of wait and see that. And Kieran Strawn, for those people who went early on him, is playing another game. So somebody to potentially look at after the bye, depending what he's doing. Or you could potentially bring him in this week if you need a cheaper ruck. The Swans are just flying. On the other hand, you've got plenty of captain options there, or vice captain options. Brody Grundy against Strawn. It's got to be looked at. Heaney in the midfield. Warner in the midfield. Goulden. So I don't think you can go wrong with any of those Swans as either a captain or a vice captain option. North Melbourne, Collingwood. Okay, I'll get to a couple of these questions now because I do like one. So we'll go Carl first. And Carl says, how do you see Simpkin? Genuine chance to get back to the more midfield heavy role, or a trap written all over him? I think this is a trap written all over him, just because that midfield time, he looked good, but like his scoring has been great this year. He got the boost because not only did he score, played West Coast last week and the North actually had a win, which great, awesome for the North supporters out there. But more importantly, at 3/4 time, so though North were winning, Simpkin kicks that first goal. So there's some points there, but North had a decent lead. Then West Coast go bang, 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 kick 6 goals, hit the front. Who puts North Melbourne back in front? Simpkin. So that's the massive boost he gets in his scoring because he kicks that goal. So he still had like the 28 touches, still played a great game. But the fact that he has that goal to put them in front, that's a massive boost for Supercoach. So is he going to do that every week? Is North Melbourne, they outscored West Coast by 280 Supercoach points last week. In most other rounds, I could click on any round here. Let's just take a random round. Round 10. So Bombers, North Melbourne. North were in that game for half a game, and then the Bombers, clicked in the gear and did enough. And Essendon in that game outscored North Melbourne by 250 points in Supercoach. If you get a game where they actually get smashed, so where here's a game where North got smashed, and there's probably been a few. Yeah, the Geelong game, they weren't really competitive in that one. And we've got it there where, again, it's like another 150 points they outscored them. They're actually closer in Supercoach than what I thought, but that's because Sheasel actually went massive. None of the other North players did anything. So, you just got a situation where North players generally don't outscore that well because they don't get that big of the pie. Last week against West Coast, they had 3, 4, 5, 6, they had 7 tons. 7 tons and then a 98. So that's just very uncommon. So could, as a forward at that price, what could he potentially average? I think he's been putting up mid 60s all year. Even if there's a boost, like, is it an 80 guy at best? You're relying on North to have some really good change of form, and it just showed. Like, I get the price point at 360. I know he's done it in the past. But he scores this year a 60, 43, 64, 58, 67, 61, 52. Like, how much more of a sample size do we need of a guy who's, going to put up those sort of mid numbers? So I think, it's fraught with a lot of danger. I know some people are just in love with that price point, but I just can't see it being a good option. So I'd be trying to leave that alone and get potentially, like, what's Mackay? Like, I think Mackay's 400K. Let's actually have a look at a couple of these forwards here, because it's a decent question about what we want to do with our extra forwards. So we know Rankin's at 552 coming back, but I think people are looking about that cheaper. So you got Harry Mackay, who's not playing this week. But yeah, he's still 422, so it's only 60k more if you can kind of find that. Caldwell's been flying under the radar. I know these aren't plays for this week, but if you can hold off and look at somebody else, so you kind of got them. Like, Liam Baker showed a little bit more form now that a couple of the Tigers are back, but I'd still be trying to avoid those sort of guys. Jeremy Cameron at 420, at least, he's going to play in winning teams on the run home. So I'd rather one of those guys, but yeah, the Blues players in particular, Mackay and Charlie Curnow, their draw coming home is really tasty, especially, as I said, in Supercoach finals. But after they play Geelong, they've got Richmond, they've got North Melbourne coming up, and then they finish with Hawthorn, West Coast, and St Kilda. That's very handy if for Mackay or Curnow. So I'd be looking at one of those guys instead. Greg, I love this one too. So from the Collingwood point of view, Jack Crisp is on a heater. Can he keep it up or will he drop off? So I'm thinking it was Nath that came on a few weeks ago. He brought in Jack Crisp, has been absolutely flying. He saw the fact that, Tom Mitchell's going to be missing a lot of time. Pendle's missing time at the moment. There's definitely a gap in that midfield. He is a defender and he's 532. So if you're looking for a defender option for Nasiah Wanganeen-Malira, yes, Crisp does have the bye next week, but then so was Wanganeen-Malira anyway, so it doesn't change your structure there. But yeah, he's since from round 8, he's gone 106, 134, 112, 94, 117, and 104. Like, you can't get any more consistent than that. So for a guy who's in that we can get as a defender, just in the last 5 weeks, he's been averaging 112. Very underrated. Not many people on him. And we know those Pies midfielders are going to continue to miss for quite a while. So, yeah, I think you could definitely go a lot worse than having a Jack Crisp in. So I like that as a real pod, mate. Gay Kev, as always, thank you, mate, for jumping on. Appreciate your support. JT, is Fisher a must-have? Was always planning on bringing in Rankin once he returned, but now I'm torn. The fact that they're both missing, it's next week. That evens it out there. I've obviously had Fisher. I brought him in a few weeks ago. It's hard not to love the way he plays from a Supercoach point of view. They see a lot of ball. And the fact that the dual position for the defense and the forward, I think, is slightly better than having the forward who plays mid, or is it Rankin pure forward, actually? So you've got that. So Rankin's a pre or forward, so you got the dual position there. If I had to choose between one or the other, I'm choosing Fisher. I think it's just a better option. And just have a look at some of these scores. Like, Fisher's still 520. So he's a great price point. He's lowest. So we've got to go back to round 8, where we got that 95. Since then, 140, 116, 113, and 120. Like we just talked about, Crisp having an average of 112 during that 5-round period. Zach Fisher's at 116. Now, is he going to keep 116 up for how long? Well, that'll all depend on sort of how North structure up if and when McKercher comes back. But until then, Zach Fisher has an absolute monopoly on that back line. We talked about that at the preseason, Zeeble/Aaron Hall role, and somebody's got to do it. He sprints down to take kick-ins. So as long as he stays fit, he is probably one of the best defenders you want to own going in. Rankin relies on sort of what Adelaide do week to week. The guy's got all the talent in the world. When they put him in that midfield, he looks brilliant. But do I trust Matthew Nicks to do the right thing? But yeah, I don't think you can go wrong either. The hard thing, of course, with them with Rankin is it's his price. Like, he's also going to go up in price as well, but he is that little bit more expensive, 40k more. But I still prefer Fisher because I just think Fisher's like the must-have. If it was Rankin versus somebody else, I'd then recommend Rankin. But I'm kind of surprised that they're playing Rankin up against the Swans first up and with the bye afterwards. They're obviously gone, we need to win this game after the loss. This is our last chance, so we've got to get the guy in here. So I think that's probably why they've done. But yeah, I'd get on Fisher. I didn't really like Cheese, moved up to 339. Awesome. Is it reckon okay to sideways Tom Green? Yep. The only thing is Tom Green's already had his bye. So if you've got other fake premiums that haven't had their buy, like a Tom Stewart type, then I'd probably move them instead of Green. He just looks so bad at the moment. The hard thing with these sort of stuff, and we saw it with Jordan Dawson, is at what point do you trade these guys and then they turn it around and start scoring? And if they continue to put up poor scores, you're ahead of the game. But if you've obviously don't have it and you've moved them on, but if they do turn it around and they get that spike like Dawson has, then you look like a champion holding. And if so many people hold them, then you're going to get rewarded. Like he's still getting the ball. The 26 touches last week, no tackle numbers, clearance numbers down. That's a little bit the problem there. The good thing this week with team selection, and we haven't got onto them because they are the last game, is GWS welcomes back Josh Kelly. So he does get that support in the midfield, even though Josh Kelly is named on the bench, which is really interesting because you'd expect Kelly to be part, if he's going to play, he's going to be part of that. You'd expect him to be part of that best 23. So I don't know why they've named him there. Maybe they are going to start him on the bench and run for there. But I think Green's looked lost without Cornelio and Kelly there, where we thought it might be the other way. So unlike Oliver, who we think should be better now that Petrarca's out, I actually think Greenwood is going to be more successful if Kelly and Cornelio can get back into that team. So that's the kind of a little bit what I'm looking at. It's not the most friendly draw coming up from the Giants. So, but at least with Green, he's a contested beast. So that's what should suit him. Does have, Port should be a contested game. Swansea is the week after. I'm not expecting him to get massive, like 130, 140 games, but could he still come back and average like a 1.5, 110 in that? Yeah, for sure. The other part you've got to think of is who you're going to side swap him to. Now, if you've got cash to do it and to get up to one of the sort of the bigger dogs, but some of these midfielders have been performing really poorly as well. So, like, you have to have a look at the scores last week. I think it's pretty well documented that we didn't have too many options last week outside of sort of your Goulden. But if we look at the highest priced players. So from the midfielders, and that's what we're focusing obviously on here. We've got Lachie Neale was by far the best, 134. Warner, there was a 98 in a game with that some of the other Swannies did pretty well. Even Treloar had one of his poorer games with a 95. Like LDU was decent, but in a game where North Melbourne dominated that for large chunks of it, for a 114, probably a bit of a disappointing return. Dunkley only like a 104, where you'd have to really scroll down to say maybe a Will Day, which no one really owned, with a 137. Cripps was disappointing. Walsh was disappointing. We know Took was. Rowell only with that 82. So there's some Took that 58. That's an absolute killer. So a lot of those sort of guys that I know are highly owned and people, kind of sort of playing around with, they've got their buy now. What do you do with them? Is Green any worse than some of those scores that those guys have sort of put up, especially those sort of 550 guys that we started with, or some teams started with, in your Tooks, in your Rowells, your Steels. So it's at least he doesn't have his buy. Maybe you can get something more out of him. And then, as I said, who are you going to trade him to? Like, there's not a lot of options unless you've got cash to go right up. And who are we wanting for the best midfielders this year? Well, we know Sarong's still going at 124. Bonds, we're talking about that illness. Butters is probably the best choice, but most people are relevant have got him. Lachie Neale, can you get up to get 630? But is he going to get tagged this week? And then it's like maybe it's Chad Warner then, because at least he hasn't got he's had his buy, but now you're paying sort of top dollar for him. There's not a huge amount of options. And Elliot Yeo, who could be a real left field one now that he's back from injury, looked good last week, even though it was only against North. At 514 has his buy this week. So there's not a huge amount to trade to in regards to that. Like maybe the only left field one of the two are the LDU that we kind of talked about, but always the worry that he could potentially be a laid out. But he looks probably the most safest at 596. Maybe Horn Francis. at 545. Kind of can't believe I'm sort of saying that, but he has been having a good year. Like leading into the bye, Horn Francis went 128, 117, 100 and 110. So he's definitely a big part of that. But then again, he did play Hawthorn and North Melbourne part of that. So yeah, it's a bit of a tough one with some of these players, but hopefully the bye does freshen them up. Matty, I like this one. Thoughts on Jordan Clark? Absolutely, still probably flying on the under the radar for Supercoach ownership. So I don't think you can go wrong with bringing him in. We know what Luke Ryan's been doing, but they're a bit of a double team. Jordan Clark's 3-round average is 137, and the fact that he's only in overall 5% of teams is absolutely highway robbery. Break even of 59. So if you're going to do it, 79, you're going to do it probably a good week to get on. He's probably my number one defensive target outside of Fisher to get in, and he's probably actually more important than Fisher because Fisher's still got his bye. So I think if you've got a defender that you need to bring in and you've got the money to say get Nass up, if you've got him, Jordan Clark definitely a good one to have. And the good thing about Clark, he does have a couple of games coming up. Richmond, West Coast, Hawthorn in there. No disrespect to Hawthorn because they're actually playing some good footy, but compared to a couple of those higher teams. But it didn't seem to even matter. Like when they played the Pies, he still dominated as well. So, looking very good, especially apart from one game against the Swans at home, he's been delivering there. But, the game at Marvel, it was absolutely awesome, but that was against St Kilda. But potentially against the Dogs this week, he could do the same thing. So I really like him. Get on him. Hey Ashley, thanks. Is Nathan Kruger a bad idea trading out Sweet? No, I like Kruger. He's the one I'm looking at over Strawn, just because I think with Adelaide, there's always that chance that they just bring in Riley O'Brien. You got to remember, Kieran Strawn's like 28 years old. He's not some rookie player. He's been on the list forever. So it's not like he's a 22-year-old guy that they can continue to get opportunities to just because they're like moving on from Riley O. I actually, and I could be wrong in this, but I feel like Riley O might even be about the same age. Maybe it's a year. They're not that far apart in age. So it's kind of something to think about there in regards to that. I actually want to confirm that, but I'm pretty positive they might be only a year or two apart, which is, really interesting. So I think if Kieran Strawn has a bad game or Riley O continues to dominate if he goes back and dominates the Sandfeld, they could just completely swap that back straight away. So it's not one I'm completely wanting to jump on. So what do we got here? Riley O'Brien is 28 years old, and then we've got Kieran Strawn, 28 years old. They're actually 1 month apart in age. So that's actually quite amazing. Where Kruger, on the other hand, Kruger is in because Collingwood have injuries, and the most important injury they have is Mason Cox. And as much as I know we bagged the big American and stuff, but he does play a very important role for Collingwood, and he is going to be out for about 6-7 weeks. I'll be trying to get him up for finals if Collingwood make it, which looks very much like Collingwood will make it and potentially finish top 4. So that'll be their thing. So Kruger's got a really good run at it. And we know Myercheck's still out for a couple of weeks. McStay's, probably not coming back after that knee injury as well. So they do have a lot of injuries. And Kruger did nothing wrong last week. He's a ruck forward, which is very handy for our teams, especially if you own Jackson. I think get on that. They're playing North this week. So, it depends what they want to do with Darcy Cameron. If, they give him a little bit more of a time up in the full line later in the game, if Collingwood are doing a number on North, North are coming off a win. So, North supposed to get into me because, yes, you're up and about. But, potentially there, you'd expect the Pies to do quite well. So, there could be opportunities there for Kruger to either get some ruck time against the second ruck or spend some time kicking some goals up on the forward line. And, he looked pretty handy, like the 7 marks, but more importantly, the 3 goals. So if he does that again, I am all about that. Hey, Joe, you beating the Hawks this week. I won't say I'm confident, but I'm actually really looking forward to it. I'm really hoping cricket gets washed out or we we take the points very quickly, so I can very quickly get to the ground and watch Dusty's 300th. So yes, mate, I really do hope it's a good game there. So yes, that'll be very interesting indeed. I know the Hawks supporters were actually talking about it. Probably the one team we've had the wood on for a while, outside of, we've had the wood for a long time, Carlton and Essendon, but against the Hawks, even during their premiership years, I think 2008 might have been 2012, and I can't remember if it was 11 or 13, but we beat them like 3 of those 4 years. So we just always seem to match up well. I don't know if it's the fact that Dimmer was one of Clarko's apprentices and just always kind of had that little edge and get him up for the Hawks games. But we do seem to always play pretty well against Hawks. Even when Hawthorn absolutely had us last year, I think we came back and was at the 1 point game, and then maybe the couple of years before that, which might have been Burgoyne's last game. We had the draw against them. So they have struggled to beat us, but I think the Hawks are in very good form. Love what they're doing with Sam Mitchell. But it's going to be hard because it is Dusty's 300th, and it's going to be a big event. So the club is going to probably do everything to get the win that day. Harry, should I get both Kruger and Dowling to field 18, or should I take the one? It kind of depends on the situation. So if you're an overall player, you want best 18. If you're playing up against leagues, kind of have a look at the situation and what you're up against. The good kind of thing is with, say, Kruger, if you were going to go Dowling, you could wait and see what your opponents are doing. But I like the Kruger pick anyway, just because, as I talked about earlier with Ashley's question, they do have a lot of injuries. So really happy for people to get on them. Carl, thanks, mate. Hope Dusty goes off. I do appreciate that. We'll see what's going on Saturday. Looking forward to it. Shame it's not. It would have been great if it was tonight. While we're sitting around here just talking some Supercoach. Imagine that, Hawthorn, Richmond, especially also Hawthorn. I think a few people called up SEN today, Hawks supporters, and saying, probably getting dudded a little bit with the Thursday, Friday night games. Now, obviously, they do look after the teams who are performing and stuff. Hawthorn have been down the bottom for a couple of years now in that rebuild, so they're not going to get the primetime games. But, as they're starting to play some better footy, they're definitely going to put their hand up. But it's just kind of maybe Richmond requested it to be, they probably would have not known originally anyway, would have they? So it would have been the AFL just thinking, we'll just chuck this in the twilight slot. But it probably deserved a Thursday night fixture, this one, especially compared to a couple of the primetime games we got last week. What an absolute snooze fest a couple of those games were. Thoughts on Cherry? Yeah, this is not too bad, mate. Cherry's been performing. I know MJ start of the year was very big on Cherry, and just continues to tick over and do his thing. Personally, if I had the choice, it's Grundy. Just dominating the SCG, 5-round average of 120. But Cherry's, he's holding his own, season average of 109, 112 over the last 5 rounds. It's got a couple decent matchups coming up in the ruck. Darcy Cameron should be a good battle. And I say that with good matchups kind of more on the run home. De Conning should be it. Like I think De Conning can get him around the ground, but Cherry will dominate him in the ruck. Geelong's ruck situation later, Richmond or West Coast or Hawthorn. So that's his run at the end of the season when we're talking about Supercoach finals and everything like that. The problem before that is after Collingwood, he does play against Gawn, Timmy English, if Witts is back, and then it's Grundy. So he has a disastrous 4 weeks after this round for a ruck. So if he can hold his own against them, awesome, because that finals time in Supercoach is going to be a massive tick as an owner. But you've got to be aware of those 4 weeks. Compare that to Grundy, and this is why massively I prefer the Grundy one. Crows this week, so up against Strawn, so he's going to dominate him. Briggs, who's a good ruck, but does give up, I think, more points than any other ruck or one of them. So that's a massive tick. For Grundy, SCG against the Jackson-Darcy combo. That's if Darcy's even playing by then. It's always a week-to-week prospect that for the big Freo lad. So we don't know that situation there. And then even on his run home, he gets Adelaide again for the Supercoach finals. He's going to be up against a Goldstein, Port Adelaide's ruck. So Grundy has one of the best ruck draws for the coming at the end of the season. So I think if you're going to choose either, choose Grundy. It's 26,000 more. That's the way I'd be going. It's not just I like Cherry around finals. Thoughts on Sexy Flanders? Is he a reliable F6, F7 going forward? Are you talking about our... Sure, not talking about Sam Flanders there, Global? Or is there somebody else I'm completely missing? Because, of course, Flanders is the number. No, we can't be, because Flanders is one. Who? Global, tell me who you're talking about there. I'm obviously missing somebody off the top of my head. Harry, struggling about a little bit this year, mate. Ranked 12,000th overall. So, unfortunately, not going to be another top 1,000 finish for me. It's an off year, but I guess everybody has an off year. Let's call. I'm trying to think who's a team that's. We'll call me the Bulldogs. We'll call me Melbourne this year, because they've been performing well and they're having an off year this year. Let's go. We'll go with that. Okay, JT. Now here says Dante. So we don't know. He's on an extended bench, but if he's named for Port, could he potentially be a better R3 than Kruger? Break even of -85. Yes. He's set for a first price rise. Could be an instant cash hold for if he keeps his spot, and that's the worry here. If he doesn't, is he going to be just straight in or out? You are right, 100%. If he doesn't if he does play this week, you're going to get that instant cash rise. We're not going to know that until final teams are done. The hard thing is they have named Soldo. They've still, what are we probably looking at? I think he's in there because, Dixon and Finlayson don't travel. So that probably means he's going to be playing forward. Is he a chance to be subbed out early as well, which is, I think, the way they would go if he is named. You have a look at that extended bench as well from Port Adelaide. So Mead's done nothing wrong this year. I'd expect him to play. Wines, he's definitely going to be in. I think Jones has been doing a job for them. I don't think Lorenzo is going to... Lorenz, don't think he will. Francis Evans, maybe. Did Narkwell even play last game? I don't think so. So it's borderline where he kind of fits into that team. Like Joe Evans, he's missed a couple last week, so probably he gets dropped. Maybe Jones will play. So I think he's borderline getting picked, and then even if he does get picked, I feel like if they don't have any injuries, he gets subbed out. So I get the whole idea because he could potentially play next week, but I think what will happen is Port Adelaide does play at home next week against the Lions. Dixon and Finlayson will come back in there, and you'll see Dante get dropped again, even if he does play. So I'm not a big fan of that one. Who averages more on the run home, Martin or McGovern? Like I'm such a big fan of Martin. Probably should have got McGovern when I had the chance a few weeks ago. Didn't. McGovern's body is obviously going to be the little bit of the question. If he can continue to hold up and play 22 games, that would be awesome. But I definitely like Martin a lot more. The role is a bit of a worry because, Redders comes back and where does he sit every week? But we've even seen when Martin goes forward, he changes games. When he's has to go on the wing, still good. He still ran through the midfield. We're not getting the great scores that we were just because he doesn't have that midfield role like he was. But it only takes one potentially more injury from Essendon, and he does slip back in there. And if they do, anytime they need the match won, and on the weekend against the Blues, that's a tough matchup, big game. The Supercoach points weren't there, but Martin scored 120 fantasy. So he's done everything right except for the fact that he's butchered the ball. And not only did he, outside of butchering the ball, which we know he does, but he butchered the ball when he was kicking it back, which ended up costing him 50 meters. So if he probably threw that back or could have somehow hit a target when just returning the ball, all of a sudden that 92 becomes 102 straight off. So if he can actually have one of those games where he hits targets like he did early in the year, he ends up scoring 130s. No problems. So he's probably Essendon's second most important player. McGovern's ticking along, doing his job every week. It'll also be a bit dependent on what they do. Like I know Barassa's having a couple of issues right now. So does that mean he has to play a little bit more lockdown and take maybe the number one defender? Do they give that to Edwards to try to still free up McGovern a little bit? Didn't have the greatest game against North on the weekend with the 88. Up before then, the 4 weeks before that was fantastic. Hopefully he can kind of keep going. Does have a couple of decent matchups in the couple of weeks after the bye. Any team that's got St Kilda on the run home has got to think about. The only issue with McGovern is those last couple of games. If he's still fit and firing by then, it is against Carlton and Geelong, which is probably the 2 worst matchups for a defender. I think it is a little bit of muchness. The other issue is it depends on your buy structure too, mate. McGovern's missing this week. Martin also missing, so you get to hold off. But yeah, I like Martin more. But it's not, I don't think there's a lot in it. I just think Martin's more of a match winner. Is Rids a top 6? Well, I think he's definitely a top 8, Joe, man. I like that, mate. So I'm not like I think I don't really like Jesus. He's a bit of a burn man. He's definitely in the conversation. I said like a couple of weeks ago, I think he's in that conversation for that top 10. I think from like that 6th spot is sort of open. Said it all year. The number of those guys can average within, close enough of each other. So, but yeah, again, Essendon has the bye. There are guys who haven't had their bye that you could bring in. So, no, we don't need to be focusing on guys who have the bye this week when there's so many good defenders. Like you look at average, yes, okay, Ridley is averaging 128. So, looking good, still 112 on the weekend, up against a couple of those really strong defenders. Played well, taking the kick-ins, no problems with that at all. Well done to anybody who got on earlier for the 5.30 price. But there are other options there. We've talked about Jordan Clark. We know McGovern, Martin are all in that range. A few people have mentioned Whitfield. Sicily can't be ignored with the Hawks and their run home. Ed Richards, if he's back fully fit, we know what he was doing. There are some guys there. And then that's without talking about Elliot Yeo, who, also is coming off that bye next week. So, yeah, definitely got to think about it. This Joe's having a little bit of a laugh there for sure. I agree, Swiz. It's hard to own just so high. Hard to, what are you saying? It's hard. He's just so highly owned that it comes good and it hurts me. But if he doesn't, I could come home strong. Yeah, and that is the hard thing there, mate. Will Day, yeah, mate. It would be a lot of fun to own, but unfortunately the bye next week probably does muck him around a little bit there too. All right, we'll go one, probably last one here, JT. Who would you rather keep, Oliver or Martin, for the remainder of the season? Thinking of trading one of them for another premium like a Dunkley Gordon, McGovern or Ridley. If I had to choose between one, I'm keeping Martin, dual position. Essendon, we know, are going to be fighting for those finals, if not playing finals. Yeah, he is the guy that Scott will move around to make sure to use him to help them win the match. So he got forward on the weekend, kicked a couple important goals. Yeah, fantastic player. Doing everything right for the Bombers. I like Oliver. I like to hold Oliver if possible to see what the outcome is for Petrarca because, naturally now he becomes their number one midfielder again. But yeah, if you've got to trade one or the other, Oliver's got to go before Martin does. So yeah, that's where I stand on that one. Thank you, Kev. Thank you again for everybody who tunes in and sends in the questions every week. I really do appreciate that on your Thursday night with no footy, guys. So hopefully it's a happy super coaching week. In regards, I have talked a little bit about those captain or those vice captain options because we're talking about Zorko in particular. If you have him, that's just a no-brainer, guys. Don't overthink that. Get on the Zorks train if you've got him. If you don't have him like me, get on Ryan against the Bulldogs or Sarong. One of those two, you probably your go-to. Nobody's got any of the Richmond or probably don't have Will Day. But yeah, this is the sort of game I'd love to just have unlimited trades and trade in Dusty because I just think he's going to go big. But if you're going your captain option, you're going to look at a couple of those Swans players. I know the Crows on the rebound. I know the Swans are playing away, but they're just too good at the moment. I'd try to avoid Dacos because there's just too many questions there about what's going to happen. He'd probably come out and smash North Melbourne. But, Liam Shields, you've got the tag option. Do they sub him off early if they don't get any injuries and just manage him through again? Does he even play? So I'd be looking at that Sydney game. Warner, Goulden, Grundy, Heaney, any of those ones that you have, that's your backup captain option this week, guys. All right, thank you so much, and we'll talk soon. Bye.